It was pretty interesting because we actually filed a complaint with the Irish Data Protection Authority in 2011 on exactly that app loophole that was now kind of used. And back then the Irish DPC didn't do anything about it. Facebook actually claimed this is all legal, that's the way it should work. Now they say they were betrayed and it was all kind of a big problem. So if they would have probably listened to privacy law in 2011, a lot of these issues wouldn't have come up. On the other hand, I wonder how much of it is really a big new privacy issue. I mean, a lot of it is basically a Trump story. So it's good that, privacy gets into debate, but I don't think most people are overly concerned with their privacy in this relation. It's kind of how did Trump game the election, which is in reality the real story. Would have published 3 weeks ago that there is like 50 million data sets that were lost. Basically, no one would have probably talked about it unless it was used for that purpose. And that should probably tell us a bit about how insensitive we oftentimes are for privacy, that only in certain situations suddenly it becomes an issue. On the other hand, people were joking and saying, like, if Cambridge Analytica really changed the election, which I personally don't know if they really did, but if they did, then probably just the Irish regulator doing its job on Facebook would have probably solved us from Trump. That was like something some people mentioned this week, which I thought was like a funny thought at least.
Sort of at a bigger picture level, I think there are a few things that we can take away, even with what we know now. First is that there's really a responsibility for consumers and the general public to understand that when they put information online, when they share information through a platform like Facebook or Twitter or any other social media technology, that is out in the public domain. And so the way that I've always thought about social media, the way that I think about it for myself and for my family and my friends, is that once you put information out there, it's out there forever. And I think about social media like a tattoo. Until you can be responsible to really make that decision for life, you shouldn't be using it. And in the same way that if you were to stand on the street corner with 1 million people holding a tape recorder and recording everything you said, not only keeping it forever, but potentially selling it to anyone who's interested in it, you shouldn't be using social media. So you have to be responsible for what you say. Now, that doesn't give any company, Facebook or Cambridge Analytica, anybody else, the right to do something with your data that they shouldn't do. So I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't be held accountable or that they shouldn't be required to be transparent with how they use their data. In fact, they should. But I think the next thing that we may see come as a result of this likely is an increased cry for regulation of social media companies. And in some aspects, I think there is a strong role for government to play in regulating, how these large platforms are really impacting our lives. They do have a huge impact on millions of people, billions of people. That impact, I think, is still yet to really be understood and realized. And in some ways, they really are the media companies that they claim to be. Social media is media, and media is regulated. So there's a role for not only the FTC and the European regulators under existing regulations, but potentially, I think we may see future regulation for these companies as well.
We in the US have really long had very different ideas about our personal data. We've gotten very used to just freely exchanging it with companies like Facebook in exchange for the services. And we haven't thought terribly deeply about what that might mean. So I think this little Facebook Cambridge Analytica case, whatever you want to call it, incident, is helping to make us really aware of just how much people can know about us based upon the little things that we share and do online. So I think it's a wake-up moment for how we handle our transactions with social media providers. I'm an advocate of individuals taking control over their data, so I think this is going to encourage that.
It's caused a lot of reevaluation, and I think the value of Cambridge Analytica, which I think the privacy industry should thank them for, is that they brought the issue to the everyday person. I think the average person on the internet did not realize what could be done with their data, and the Cambridge Analytica is people are going like, oh, didn't realize they could do that. So there's now going to be a lot more government motivation to shut it down and to regulate it. Unfortunately, Facebook and Google did not regulate themselves, and now the government's going to do it.
It's something that for those of us who've lived in the data space for decades have not been surprised by. I have the same reaction to it that I had when the Edward Snowden revelations came to the fore. I'd been working in data for 20 years, and so it wasn't surprising that that's what the NSA was doing with our data. Of course that's what they're doing. What surprised me at that time was how surprised everybody else was. And with Facebook, again, the surprising part is how surprised everybody else was. I think the part that's really upsetting for people is not realizing how closely Facebook follows them around the internet and in their personal lives beyond their use of Facebook. Having access to their messages, their phone calls, their text histories, everything that they wouldn't think they had access to, and then the proliferation of that data with their business partners, that's really disturbing. And so I think a lot of this is bringing to the fore the need to build trust with your customer base, and I think Facebook has a real challenge in front of it in that it's broken customers' trust because they have done so much and used data, even if it was with the best of intentions, people are highly suspicious of that. And so I think they've got a lot of work to do to rebuild the trust with their customer base, and I think it means a lot of organizations have a lot of work to preemptively prove that they are a trustworthy organization.
It's a perfect example of the problem with identity and information value. They were retained to do certain analysis, and so they were given identifying data. They didn't need identities of individual Facebook users to do what they were contracted to do. But there was no way to give them the information they needed without the identities. And it's the identities that were misused. And so the Facebook Cambridge Analytica example is a poster child for the need for a new approach to technology and data use that divorces those two. We call the data that we generate variant twins. A digital twin is a digital representation of a person, place, sensor, or device. A variant twin is the same information, less the identifying elements, which is all you need for most processing. The GDPR says if you pseudonymize the data, if you create a pseudonym that doesn't identify someone, it's okay that someone in your organization has the ability to relink, but only certain people under controlled conditions. What Facebook did not have was this ability to separate identity from value. That's what the GDPR is all about.
So I think the most interesting aspect for me of Cambridge Analytica right now is the difference in response between the United States and the EU. In the United States, you see an uproar in regards to the consumers. Individuals on Facebook are starting to delete their accounts. Those Mark Zuckerberg has said he hasn't seen a substantial number delete them. In the EU, you're seeing a call for legal action, and that comes from the difference in definition of privacy in the US versus the EU. So what I think you'll see is that there'll be more swift action in the EU, especially with the new General Data Protection Regulation going into place in May. And then the United States may follow suit depending on the uproar, the public outcry from the different voting districts. And of course, with midterms coming up, that'll obviously be an issue as well.